are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Today, we have a special guest talking to us today, a writer and editor, Kristina Smeriglio, and she let me practice that last name a few times in the green room, so I appreciate her patience. She has an awesome book that we'll be discussing today, Falling into Fire, and they thought that was a pretty bold statement title for a book. Wait till you hear her story. We're going to learn a little bit about her and her life and how she became a writer and editor today, and more so about her book, Falling into Fire, and the story behind that. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you, Kristina, for your time. How you doing?
Thank you for having me, Shamaya. It's great to be here.
I appreciate you being on. So kind of start out with what caused you to want to pursue the career in writing and being an editor, and how you came across writing this piece, Falling into Fire.
Thank you. So writing has always been there for me as a medium to express myself. But to be honest, it wasn't my first choice for a career. You know, I kind of explored a lot of other fields before I came to this, but it really was amazing how I became a writer, because what I found that I really loved to do was understanding people, helping people. I really wanted to know why people were the way they were, why did they do the things they do, say the things they say. So naturally, I pursued a career in psychology. That's what I began to study. And I actually got my bachelor's in psychology. But then when it came time to choose a graduate program, which is something I knew I always wanted to do, I started thinking about, okay, there's different programs in psychology, different fields. And I knew that I wanted to help people that had gone through similar experiences that I had, you know, particularly with issues of identity, of abuse, you know, all related matters of mental health that tend to happen as we're growing up and we're forming these connections with each other. But when it came time to choose a program, I couldn't find one that I liked. And honestly, I did some soul searching. And at that very moment, it was difficult for me to think about sitting in an office and hearing other people's stories all day long. And I realized if I couldn't be able to do that, that I had a lot of healing still left to do. So, but I still wanted to help people, even regardless of where I was at. So like I said, I did some soul searching, and I thought about how writing used to be a medium for me growing up. And it was a way for me to express my feelings and process what I was going through. So I ended up pursuing a master's in writing. And in that program, when I was writing my master's thesis, actually even before that, in my fiction writing workshop, this story, the story that later became Falling into Fire, started to form. And I truly believe it started to form because there was a huge part of me that, like I said, wanted to firmly heal and heal in a way that I would allow me to help others, right? So I turned it into my master's thesis, and eventually it turned into Falling into Fire. And what I love about this piece was that it really was a way for me to merge my interest in psychology with my love for writing. And it was a way for me to truly overcome some really hardcore experiences in life and present them in a way so that others may read it and heal and go on their own journeys. So that's kind of how I became to be a writer. And although I write many things, this is something that is very important to me, because I feel like the message in our hearts, whatever it may be, whether it's a healing journey, whether it's you're already in a place of empowerment and you want to share your message, that's what I love to help people discover. So I did it first with myself. And as an editor, I love to do it with others so that they may share their truth as well.
Listen, on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Kristina Smeriglio, and her book, Falling into Fire. You set it up pretty nicely. So when it comes to the book title, Falling into Fire, How did you come up with this, and what was the focal point of the story in this book?
So the title Falling into Fire came about when I turned my master's thesis into a novel. So originally my thesis was titled Hallowed Be Thy Fall. And I did love that title. I feel like it was very appropriate when it was my master's thesis. But in turning it into a novel and speaking to my editor, we tried to pick a title that honed in on the message even more. And Falling was definitely a focal point for my story because this character falls over and over again, not only just falling in the sense of tripping over experiences in life and struggling, but it was also a fall very deep into these recesses of the mind, into these patterns that were there that she needed to discover. So there was an actual external sense of falling, and then there was the internal sense of falling into this, I want to say, pit of despair, to be honest. She really ended up in this deep, dark place, which is where she needed to be in order to overcome. And the fire aspect, not only is there literal fire elements in the story, the element of fire is a great symbol for transformation, of deconstruction and rebuilding. And it's a symbol that I've always embraced and loved because of this power that it has for that sense of transformation, which I thought was appropriate for this story. So we ended up coming up with the title Falling into Fire. And to be honest, I loved it. I loved what it was when it was my master's thesis, but when I truly embraced what it meant to be falling into fire and I wrote it as a novel, I truly fell in love with my title. And I thought it was, like I said, an appropriate title. And the focal point really is that it's overcoming these intense experiences in life, these intense truths about ourselves, what we have come to know about our experiences, what we have come to know about ourselves, our relationships with others. It's coming to the truth of a lot of our experiences and overcoming these very dark experiences in our lives in order to come on the other side empowered. So that's really the focal point there for my main character, who confronts these experiences in the setting that is the Garden of Earthly Delights, right? So it's kind of set against this fantastical setting. And through that setting, she's able to explore these parts of herself and overcome them.
In the book, when you mention her being in a dark place and how that was necessary for her personal transformation and overcoming challenges, when someone is reading this book, I'm sure they might be able to picture themselves in some similar situations because we all have our dark storms that just kind of happen in life. But to your point, they're kind of necessary for us to experience that fullness of transformation. Elaborate a little bit more on that for our listeners and how that's such a pivotal moment for the character.
Yeah, so actually, even in the writing of it itself, I set the story in first person for that reason. Not only did it help me write the story in a more honest way and immerse myself in it, but I want the reader to embrace this character. Now, the person reading the story may not have gone through what my main character went through specifically, but by embracing it, they're able to kind of follow this type of journey. And the reason I have the character go to such a deep part of it and a part of herself is because, like I said earlier, and like you mentioned, there does need to be some sense of a confrontation with our darkness in order to look at it for all that it is, right? So if I was to just look at my experiences on the surface and be like, okay, that was bad, I want to escape it, my healing is only going to reach potentially a very superficial level. Right now, if I go deep into it, if I take a look at it, if I see what was happening from all sides, if I see how it impacted me in the different areas of my life, I can begin to understand why certain things were happening, why I was feeling a certain way about certain dynamics with people. At the end of the day, not even so much the actual experience itself, but it's what I took away from it, right? It's the filters that caused me to see certain things a certain way, to feel a certain way. If I wasn't able to get to a dark place to confront that, I would probably just write it off and move on with my life. And then potentially similar patterns would emerge in relationships, which is what was happening to me. A lot of the same things kept happening to me. And I started to think, is it something that I'm doing? Is it something that I'm saying? People would give their advice, but at the end of the day, it wasn't about that. I had to just go to those moments, go to how I was feeling about it, and just cater to myself, nurture myself, and just sit with that pain for a while, have a conversation with it. And by doing that, by taking that time to take care of myself and look at things holistically, I was able to overcome it. So I think that that's a pivotal part of healing, is not being afraid to look at our experiences. As much as they hurt us, I feel like it is important to take a look at those experiences. Yes, we have to be mindful and have compassion with ourselves if it's a little difficult to do that. And that's something that happened to me. I was writing this story. Some scenes and some topics were very difficult for me to write about because I was still being hurt by them. But that was all the more opportunity for me to take a look at them so then I can translate it into the story. So I feel like it's a great opportunity for us to get to know ourselves and overcome anything that may be holding us back.
So in this book, for our audience to get a great picture of what this book is all about, is a story about finding love and how difficult it was to attain, the pitfalls and the horrors of breakups, loneliness, and the doubts of self-worth, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're writing this based on true life experiences as a young woman. Kind of dive into that section for the audience and how those real life experiences help you get that message across.
Reflecting on my personal experiences and really taking them on as I was writing the story, it really helped me to see and embrace how universal a lot of these experiences are. Because even when I allowed my main character, Priella, to show me what was happening to her, and it triggered me and these experiences I had gone through, it really was a way for me to allow the audience to feel like they're not alone. You know, if I didn't talk about my personal experiences, I wouldn't have been able to go as deep into the story as I did. I wanted to be vulnerable. I wanted to air out my dirty laundry, so to speak, in a way that allowed the reader to know that anything can happen. Even though this was a fantasy story, it does mirror my life. And I did that intentionally because I wanted others who had gone through similar experiences or who knew people had gone through similar experiences be able to find that healing for themselves. And I knew that that needed to happen and could only happen if I channeled my very personal experiences.
And people can get this book on Amazon, anywhere they can find a book, Fall Into Fire. We're talking to Kristina Smeriglio and all about her book, Fall Into Fire. This is important because so many people, I just talked to a guest earlier today about sometimes you just really got to zone in. Where are you at? You know, like, what are you feeling? What are you going through? And acknowledge that, because sometimes we try to perform for other people. In other words, like, we want to please other people and put this mask on what they approve. And we don't want to really show who we are because we're afraid of being rejected or we're afraid of not being listened to. So when you wrote this book, it's part of you make sure that mask is not on. You're giving your authentic self for people to really feel what you felt in those true life events.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up because that was part of my task. It was really allowing myself to be that vulnerable. And even though I knew that the people around me, should they read this book, I knew they were going to be able to put two and two together. They were going to understand what it was that I was talking about. Even if this is a fantasy story, like I said, since these thoughts mirror my own, these experiences are reflective of what I went through, people were going to put them together. They were going to have certain beliefs about me. And to be honest, I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? These experiences happened to me. Who cares what anybody knows? In fact, had they known sooner, maybe things could have been different. And even though I am no longer so hurt by the way things happen for me, I found this medium and I feel like it can help others. Other people, nobody should hide what they are going through. If they are going through something, they should be able to open up about it. They should be able to be vulnerable about it. And the only way to do that is if you remove the mask. So I feel like I had to do this. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter what anybody thinks about me, because these experiences were real. They happened to me, regardless of the fantasy. I stated there in the introduction, like, this is my story. And I'm sharing with it now. At the end of the day, everybody, as a writer, it's a piece of them in that book, no matter how it takes form. And with this story in particular, I had to take off the mask in order to show this side of myself and my experience. And again, the only way I was able to truly heal was removing that mask. So I feel that anybody that goes through a similar journey, whether or not they share it in a public forum, like I did here in writing a book, they do need to take off that mask. And it's a very essential part of healing, is taking a real honest look at themselves.
Once again, listen, I'll be Focused Radio, talking to our guest today, Kristina Smeriglio. And you, as a writer and an editor, you also have a pretty cool blog that people can check out. I mean, we're talking about being vulnerable. We're talking about being yourself. And we live in a world where a lot of people feel like they have to have a filter for selfies and just have this mask. And I had to act a certain way with this crowd and with that crowd to not offend people or to not feel like I'm appreciated for my uniqueness. When you write these blogs and you are a writer yourself, and as a creative doing that, why is it so important for you and for others who might be listening to this to share their gifts and talents and put themselves out there and not be afraid about how people will receive it?
I feel like we are here to share the truth of who we are, regardless of how people receive it. Everybody is born with individual qualities. And I feel like when we hide those qualities, we are doing a huge disservice to who we are. And as someone who hid for a very long time, it's interesting because I've always been an advocate for truth. I always needed to be honest and I wanted to share myself. For a long time, when these experiences were happening to me, I was so rejected or told, oh, your life isn't bad. And I was silenced so much that I began to hide. And having seen the wounds that built because of it, I now know more than ever how important it is to be open about whatever's going on with us. And at the end of the day, the only way we can help each other is by being open and being honest. Just creating this filter, to me, doesn't allow for the true value of who you are to come through. If me as a writer, if I pursue another profession that has nothing to do with my talents, I'm now hurting myself and I'm also hurting the person who has the talent, right? I feel like we all need to be honest with ourselves with the talents we have been given and what we are called to pursue, because that's how we're really going to find, meaning and fulfillment in this life. And at the end of the day, like, if we're not being true to who we are, like, what are we doing? So I feel like in the blogs that I write, even just exploring any kind of thoughts I may have, which is what my blog tends to be, it's the stream of consciousness about certain topics, very philosophical, very existential, and trying to understand certain experiences in life, much like my book. I feel like these are things that we should all be doing. This sense of having awareness of our life, having mindfulness in our experiences and being present is our way to have a full life, not just wandering aimlessly about in our day. In my story, I kind of talk about, very lightly, I touch upon feeling this sense of being lost, right? That's kind of like where I'm at. I feel lost. I don't know what to do. And you can see my character's aimless wanderings, right? Like she has no direction in her life. And it has a huge part to do with not having a clear picture as to who she is and what her experiences have been. She has a pretty strong sense of self. She knows what she wants, right? Like there was some direction, but there was a lot to still be uncovered, right? So I feel like by being mindful and exploring her life the way that she does in the story, she was able to get to know herself at a deep level. This is something that I've always done in my life and I aim to do on a regular basis because I know that's how I'm going to have that full life and have that sense of direction and know what it is I'm supposed to be doing by being present and just hyper aware of my experiences, how they make me feel. Otherwise, we're kind of just acting and reacting. And to me, I have always made it a point to understand my reactions, whether they are positive, negative, however we identify it, just being mindful of those characteristics as to who I am. And if it's something that's getting in the way of being successful, I confront it, right? Like I did in that book. So my blog is very similar. Obviously, it's coming from me directly, right? Like the fantasy fiction story, I sort of take on this avatar that is my protagonist, Priella. In my blog, it's just directly me. But it is very similar. I feel that this is something that everyone should be able to do, regardless of if they share it in writing or not. I like to encourage people to be active participants in their lives.
We're talking to our guest, Kristina Smeriglio, and when you look at the fact that you not only have your Master's of Arts in Writing, but you also have your Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology, how has the study of psychology helped contribute to just your writing style?
Completely, I would say. And honestly, my license in neurolinguistic programming as well. Having this sort of psychological lens and this ability to look at the workings of the mind helped me be able to write this story, right? So having my master's in writing gave me the technical aspects of how to write. And then I pair it with my bachelor's in psychology, which allows me to see the intricacies of the character, to see how they develop, what's her mindset, why is she doing the things that she's doing, and sort of these therapeutic techniques, right, which I also learned with NLP. I was able to uncover a lot that I may not have been able to without this background. So it reflects in my style quite heavily, I believe. I ask a lot of questions. I have a lot of reflections. And I do think it is heavily inspired by the fact that I have this psychology background. And that is a major interest of mine. So I would say very heavily.
Well, with that said, I want to say, man, time flies by when you're having a good conversation. Been talking to our guest today, Kristina Smeriglio, and you can definitely go to her website, KristiSmeriglio.com is the website, short for Kristina. Want to say thanks again for you taking your time talking to us. And what's the best call to action you have for our listeners?
The best call of action, honestly, I would say whatever's inside of you, share it. I want people to be everything that they are and to share the truth of who they are. And if you ever need help sharing what's inside of you, I'm here for you. As someone who has done it themselves and been a product of that transformation, I'm always going to suggest that other people take the chance on themselves, get to know themselves, and allow the truth of who they are to shine bright.
Well, once again, you go visit her website. It's KristiSmeriglio.com. And man, want to say thanks for taking time talking to us and keep doing what you do.
Thank you so much, Shamaya. I really appreciate it.